I never cried at my grandfather's funeral. Not because I didn't love him, I did. But because, deep down, I felt like the only honest part of my family had just been buried. I grew up in a house where silence was a language. You could hear emotions only through slammed doors, passive-aggressive sighs, and long, pregnant pauses at the dinner table. We were the kind of family that looked perfect in Christmas photos. Matching sweaters, forced smiles but fractured underneath. My dad was all charm and cold logic, a successful dentist who believed feelings were optional. My mom? She followed his lead. She called it keeping the peace. But it always felt like surrender. The only person who really saw me, was Grandpa. Grandpa Ray lived in the little yellow house at the edge of town. The one with the creaky porch swing and the faded American flag that fluttered even when there was no wind. Every Saturday, from the time I was 6 until I left for college, I'd ride my bike over and we'd sit in his garage workshop. He'd build birdhouses. I'd eat stale licorice and read him random trivia from old magazines. He told me once, "Families are puzzles, kiddo. But not all the pieces come from the same box." I didn't get it back then. I do now. He died at 87. Peacefully, they said. I was the one who found him. A collapsed shadow in his recliner, old westerns still playing on mute. His hand was resting on a folder labeled, "For Eli." I didn't open it right away. We were in the middle of funeral arrangements. My dad turned into this military-style coordinator, barking orders, micromanaging grief. He didn't cry. My mom dabbed at her eyes like it was a social requirement. I just moved through it all in a fog. People said things like, "He lived a good life," and, "At least he didn't suffer." But all I could think was, "He died alone." The letter inside the folder didn't look old. It was dated 2 weeks before he passed. The envelope was thick, and inside it wasn't just one letter, it was 3. One for me, one marked, "To be opened with caution," and one addressed simply, "For the truth." The one meant for me started like this. "Eli, I know this won't sit easy in your chest, but I'd rather leave behind a fire than a lie." What followed didn't just sit uneasy. Split me in two. It turned my family from a silent, repressed mess into something worse. A deliberate illusion. The kind of lie people wrap in tradition and call it love. He told me he'd been keeping a secret for decades. One he wasn't proud of, but one he couldn't take to the grave. He told me the man I called Dad might not be who I think he is. At first, I thought it was just the ramblings of an old man nearing the end. Grief makes you paranoid. But then I opened the second letter. The one marked, "To be opened with caution." It wasn't just a letter. It was a birth certificate, and it had a different last name than mine. I stared at the birth certificate like it had teeth. It was brittle at the edges, like it had been folded and refolded too many times. But the name printed on it was unmistakable, Elijah Ray Connor. My name was Elijah Ray Weston. The middle name was Grandpa's, that wasn't a surprise. But Connor? The mother's name, Margaret Connor. The father's name? Unknown. That couldn't be right. My mom's name is Catherine Weston. My dad is Stephen Weston. I'd signed forms, school paperwork, college loans, all with Weston. But this piece of paper said otherwise. My hands started shaking. I didn't want to believe it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Grandpa had kept someone else's paperwork and accidentally left it for me. But the handwriting on the note that came with it, it was unmistakably his. Loopy, old man cursive. The note said, "Eli, the name on this certificate is the one your mother gave you before things got complicated. I'll explain more in the last letter. But I didn't want you to find out like this, confused, angry. You deserved the truth your whole life. I just didn't have the courage to give it. Complicated. What the hell did that even mean? I couldn't ask Grandpa. He was 6 feet under by then. And I couldn't ask my parents, not yet. Not without knowing more. So I drove to the county records office, hands sweating the entire way, and requested the original birth certificate for Elijah Ray Weston. They didn't have one. Not from the year I was born, not under my parents' names. But they did have a sealed file under Connor. And I couldn't access it, not without a court order or a signed affidavit from a parent. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I called my Aunt Lorna, Grandpa's only daughter, the black sheep of the family. She lived 3 states away and hadn't spoken to my parents in over a decade. I barely knew her, but when I said Grandpa left me something strange, and I needed help understanding it, she drove down that weekend. She didn't ask for details on the phone, but the second she walked through my apartment door, she hugged me and whispered, "So he finally told you." That stopped me cold. Told me what? I asked. She sat down, sighed, and looked older than she had on Facebook. Then she said words that rearranged my entire life. "Stephen isn't your father, Eli. Your real dad was a man named David Connor. He died before you turned 2. I laughed. I actually laughed. Felt insane. No, my dad is alive. He's sitting in a house 2 miles from here, criticizing my haircut and reminding me to file taxes early." She shook her head. "He raised you, yes, but he came later, after David, after the accident." I pressed her, voice rising. "Why lie to me? Why erase him? Why pretend I'm someone I'm not?" She didn't flinch. "Because your mom was young, grieving, and Stephen had money. He was stability. And your mother, she was told by our father that David wasn't good enough, that it would be better for you this way. So they made it official. New name, new records, a fresh start." My stomach turned. I asked, "Did Grandpa know the whole time?" She nodded. "He pushed for it. It didn't make sense. Grandpa was the one who always made me feel real. And yet he'd helped erase the first chapter of my life." That night, I finally opened the 3rd letter. The one labeled, "For the Truth." Inside, Grandpa had written 20 pages. Not a letter, but a confession. One that began with, "I did something I've regretted every day since your 2nd birthday. And it started with a lie I told your mother that I never had the right to make." I read the letter 3 times that night. Then I threw up. Not because it was graphic, though parts of it were, but because it felt like a punch to the center of my identity. The man I loved most had not only kept this secret, he had created it. In Grandpa's words, "When your mother came home pregnant, she was 17. She told me it was David's. A college dropout, older than her, living paycheck to paycheck." I was furious, but I thought maybe with time she'd come to her senses. Then David died. Motorcycle accident. "And your mother," she shattered. I told her the world didn't have to know, that a fresh start was the best gift we could give you. So I paid a lawyer, changed the birth record, and I told your mother she'd thank me one day. He called it a kindness, a way of protecting me. But the more I read, the more it felt like control. Like he'd rewritten my life with a pen I never saw coming. And what made it worse? He ended the letter with, "I love you more than anything, Eli. But I couldn't go without telling you. Forgive me if you can." Couldn't. Not yet. I told myself I needed to sit with it, to process. But the truth is, I became obsessed. I started digging. Through old boxes in my parents' basement. Through newspaper clippings. Through Facebook profiles of Connors I didn't know. Looking for a nose like mine or eyes that matched. Then I found him. David Connor's brother. My biological uncle lived 30 miles away. I drove to his auto shop, pretending I needed a quote. I stood there, staring at a man who looked like me, and I felt something crack inside. I didn't say anything that day, but I took a flyer. I watched how he talked to his customers, how his voice sounded, if it reminded me of my own. It did. I went home and tried to tell my mom. She froze. Her face didn't even twitch. Then she said, "I don't want to talk about that." That was it. Not denial. Not outrage. Just a closed door. I said, "Why didn't you ever tell me about David? Why did you pretend Stephen was?" She snapped. "Because I needed to, Eli. I was broken. I was a child raising a child. And your grandfather said this was the only way. He promised I'd be okay." I asked, "Was I okay?" She didn't answer. From then on, my parents avoided me. My texts got one-word replies. My dad, Stephen, stopped calling. Not even for my birthday. I knew the truth had consequences. I just didn't realize how deep they'd cut. And then, one night, I found something that changed everything again. Buried in one of Grandpa's old storage bins, between rusted screws and receipts from the 90s, was a small, locked journal. And taped to the back, a photo of my mom holding me in a hospital room, with a man I'd never seen before standing next to her, hand on her shoulder, smiling. On the back, in Grandpa's handwriting, David. He never got to take him home. I stared at that photo until the corners started to fray in my hands. It wasn't grainy or vague. It was sharp, clear, the kind you frame on a mantel. The man next to my mother, David Connor, had the same sharp cheekbones I'd spent years resenting in the mirror. He looked so proud, like someone who had everything to lose and didn't know he was already losing it. That night, I made a choice. I scanned the photo and printed a dozen copies. I slipped one into an envelope with no note and left it on my dad's windshield. The man who raised me, the one who taught me how to tie a tie, how to check oil, how to lie to my own face. Another copy I mailed to my parents' house. And then one more, this one with a letter I sent to my uncle David's brother. In the letter I wrote, "I think you knew about me. Maybe not for sure, but in your gut. I'm Eli, your nephew, David's son. And I'd like to meet." It didn't take long for things to unravel. My phone rang 2 days later. It was my dad. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks. He didn't say hello. Just, "So this is how you do it? You think this is fair?" I snapped. "What's fair? Living a life where everyone lied to me for convenience." He exhaled hard. "We gave you everything. I gave you my name. I raised you. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you played a part in erasing someone else's. In erasing mine." There was silence. Then he said something that felt like it had teeth. "If you go down this road, Eli, you don't come back." And he hung up. 3 days later, my uncle texted. A short message. "I've waited 26 years to know if you were real. Come by the shop anytime." When I walked in, he was already outside, leaning on the hood of an old Chevy. He smiled like someone who'd rehearsed it too many times. His eyes welled up before either of us spoke. He said, "You look like him. You've got his hands." That broke me. I cried. In front of a man I'd known for 30 seconds. He took me inside, made coffee, showed me photos, David with a guitar, David as a kid, David holding me as a baby. Then he handed me something wrapped in an old t-shirt. I unwrapped it and found a tiny music box. When I opened it, it played "You Are My Sunshine." Faint, warbled, but intact. "He bought it for you," my uncle said. "Carried it in his jacket every day. Said when you got big enough, he'd play it for you before bed." That night, I slept with it on my nightstand, like it might make up for something I never got to have. But just when I thought I had all the answers, the full picture, my mom showed up at my apartment. Hair wet from the rain, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. She said, "There's more. Things I never told even your grandfather. If you really want to know everything, I'll tell you. But once you know, Eli, you can't unknow it." I let her in. She sat on the couch, pulled out an old envelope of her own, and whispered, "David didn't just die in a motorcycle accident. He was leaving. He was going to fight for custody." And just like that, I realized the truth wasn't done breaking me yet. The room got cold when she said it. Not physically, just the kind of cold that happens when the air thickens with something you weren't supposed to hear. My mother looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her hands clenched the fabric of her coat like she was bracing for impact. I asked quietly, "You said he was going to fight for custody?" She nodded. Slowly. Her voice came out like crushed paper. "Yes, he wanted full custody. Said I wasn't stable. That I was too young. He didn't trust me to raise you alone." I stood there in disbelief. "So, what happened? Did you stop him?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I never got the chance to. He died before it went to court. That's the truth. But I didn't fight it when your grandfather erased him. I let it happen. I wanted to forget. I wanted to start over. And Stephen was there. He offered something I didn't think I deserved. A second chance." I was silent, not because I forgave her, but because I finally understood her. She was 17, grieving, terrified, and caught in the gravitational pull of a father my grandfather, who decided what love should look like and bulldozed everything else. But then she pulled something from her purse. A photo, torn like it had been ripped in half and then taped back together. It was of me, maybe 3 years old, clutching a stuffed bear. David's handwriting was scrawled on the back. "For my boy, I'll find you, no matter what." I felt sick. He had wanted me. He hadn't abandoned me. He had fought. And my entire life had been built on the assumption that he didn't. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked, "Does Stephen know all of this? The custody stuff?" She nodded. "He knows. He knew from the beginning. He said we had to protect you from the chaos. From being a child caught between ghosts." That line, "caught between ghosts," it stuck with me. Because that's exactly how it felt. Like I had been haunted my whole life by echoes of people I never met. A father who wanted me. A grandfather who protected me by pretending I was someone else. And now, a family I barely recognized anymore. Couldn't go home. Not back to them. Not after this. So I stayed with a friend for a while. I told work I needed time. And every night, I sat with that music box playing "You Are My Sunshine" until it stopped feeling like a knife to the chest. Then came the voicemail. From Stephen. His voice was calm. Almost too calm. "I don't blame you for digging. Curiosity is a curse in our family. But know this, Eli, I raised you. I held your hand when you had nightmares. I taught you to ride a bike. I stayed when your real father didn't. I wanted to scream. He didn't leave. He died trying to fight for me. But I didn't call back. Instead, I wrote him a letter. 1 page. I said, 'You were there, and I'll always be grateful. But you were also part of the lie. You watched me grow up without a name I had a right to. You stood by while I mourned a father I didn't know I had. That doesn't get erased just because you loved me.' I don't know if he ever read it. A week later, I changed my last name. Not back to Connor, not yet. But I dropped Weston. I told myself it wasn't rebellion. It was reclamation. I wasn't done grieving. But I was done pretending. It's been 11 months since I opened that letter. I've moved to a new apartment, a little further from where I grew up, closer to David's brother, who now insists on calling me nephew, like he's making up for lost time. The music box sits on my bookshelf now. I don't play it often. Not because it hurts, but because I don't want the melody to wear thin. It's strange what we protect after the truth has shattered us. People ask sometimes why I don't talk to my parents anymore. And I lie. I say we drifted. I say I'm busy. Because how do you explain that the people who raised you, clothed you, cared for you, also erased you? Stephen never replied to my letter. No call. No text. Nothing. But last week, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small wooden box. Inside that, every Father's Day card I had ever made for him. Even the one where I spelled Dad with a backward D. There was no note. Just the cards. I stared at them for a long time. And for a second I felt this ache. Because love, even when it's built on lies, still carves its shape into you. And part of me will always want to believe that Stephen wasn't just complicit, that he really did love me in the only way he knew how. But love without truth? It rots. I haven't forgiven my mom either. But I do see her differently now. Not as the cold, emotionally distant woman I grew up with, but as a girl, once terrified, once in love, who made choices she thought would protect us both. Flawed ones, costly ones, but not evil. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if David had lived. If he'd won that custody case. Would I have grown up in a cluttered apartment over an auto shop? Would I have learned to play guitar? Would I have ever met the people who lied to me or loved me? In the life I ended up with, there's no clean answer. There's just what happened. I started seeing a therapist. Something I'd never have done a year ago. She said something that stuck with me. When someone burns down your house, you can't live in the ashes. But you can build a new one with what didn't burn. So I've started building. A little at a time. A name reclaimed. A truth unburied. A self rediscovered. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what my grandfather hoped I'd do with the truth. Maybe he just wanted to die with a lighter heart. But he passed the weight on to me. and I'm still learning how to carry it.
If you made it this far, you're officially part of the drama. Subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done?